Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have with me a very special guest, a former vice president of the Windows division, Moshe Dunie. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm well.
Well,
Pleased to be here.
yeah, I'm pleased to be talking with you. I'm so excited because I wanted to talk about a lot of things, but primarily I wanted to, if you can first talk a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Israel. I served as an officer in the Air Force, studied in the Technion, and this is how I started my career. And it kind of came full circle because I'm now a member of the Technion Board of Governors. And I worked first as a software engineer and then as a software manager, starting my career in Israel, working for in the aerospace industry for companies like Astronautics. And then I moved to the United States when the PC was invented, the personal computer. Right? And I wanted to switch from the aerospace industry, which was exciting, and I did some very interesting projects in Israel, like we designed a new computer for the new version of the F-16 fighter. And that was a very interesting and also challenging project from an engineering software point of view. And it introduced me to the United States because our customer was General Dynamics, so we spent time in General Dynamics in Texas. But when the personal computer was invented, I wanted to kind of get involved in that directly. And so I moved to Silicon Valley and worked in that area for 7 years, and then hired by Microsoft to be a project manager. Initially, we were developing together with IBM because Microsoft Career started as a partnership with IBM. And so we were going to develop together an operating system called OS2. And I was the project manager on the Microsoft side. But at some point we realized, because we also had a smaller team that developed Windows, and it was released and became a success. The Windows that was released then was a consumer version, not a business version. But we decided, we saw the success, and we said it wouldn't make sense for application writers to have to write one application for Windows and one for OS2. So we decided that we should merge the two and come up with a Windows version for business. IBM wasn't interested in that. And so we decided to go on our own. It was not an easy decision to divorce from IBM because at the time, now it's easy to say, Microsoft is known. At the time, we were a young company and IBM was the big leader. And so to go on our way was a courageous and a bit risky decision, but it paved the path for our humongous success, and I feel blessed to be part of it from the beginning. And I was promoted and eventually became the vice president of the Windows division in charge of the development part. And so at the height of that, we ran the biggest software project at the time in the world. I had more than software full-time, 3,000 software engineers full-time working for me, plus 1,500 contractors. I had a group in Israel, Israel R&D, that contributed to that, and I had a group in India, and I had a group in England, and I had a group in different places in Europe, like Ireland, doing the European version. So it was a big project, and both fascinating from the technology point of view, because we really literally changed the world as we know it. For example, at the time, Wall Street, the trader, Wall Street trader, was running on Sun Microsystems. And they were running like transactions of millions of dollars a second. And if you wanted to know, right, who is winning the market, you look at who the traders are running because they had the biggest demand. And so our goal was to replace the Sun microsystem with a version that was less expensive because it was both based on the Intel architecture and the Microsoft Windows. And it took 2 releases to do that, but eventually we replaced the Sun microsystem. And in fact, Goldman Sachs ran on our beta version, and they were so happy, the trader, that even when we released the final version, they didn't switch from the beta version. They kept running on our beta version. I would travel around the world. One of my greatest satisfaction was to meet customers and see how we enabled them to do all kinds of things, from a German 911, the emergency service, to the French railway, to the biggest banks in the world. So, in other words, Microsoft became from a consumer company to an enterprise company, to a business, and that was a huge success. And so that's what I've done. And at some point, after doing maybe 7 or 8 releases, I decided it's time for me to semi-retire. I've been fully semi-retired. I then worked for a while in volunteering as the president of the American Jewish Committee between 2006 2009. The American Jewish Committee is like the State Department of the Jewish people. We meet with prime ministers, president, ministers, ambassadors of different countries, and deal with human rights. Of course, our focus is anti-Semitism and things like that, but we dealt with human rights in general. So, like, I remember meeting with the ambassador of China and talking about human rights in China. I had, with 2 other colleagues of mine, we had a meeting with Mubarak in Egypt in 2008. And that was a very interesting meeting. And
yeah, I'm sure.
So that was kind of very big change of scenery. Although when you are in Microsoft, the relationship between big companies are not that different than the relationship between countries, because it's all about interest, yeah, right? And managing the interest and trying to find solutions that works for everybody. And after that, I went more into dealing. What I do now is investment in technology, and that's what I do now on an independent basis.
So a lot of technology researchers or academics talk about the world before DOS and Linux and all the early Apple modulars and chips, and talking about the transformation of the world from the technological dark age into the new modern internet, wide web world. So how would you characterize this transformation from the DOS into a new shining utopian dawn that is the internet and the Windows processing system that is practically everywhere, all across the globe?
The way science and engineering and technology develops is by building steps. You need every step. In other words, you look back at what was for 20 years, and on one level you say it seems so unsophisticated, but you couldn't get where we are today without that step. Every step leads to the next step. It's an evolution, really, that in itself is also, it's an interesting thing because it's both evolutionary and revolutionary. every now and then a revolution happens. And so in a way, the DOS area was a revolution because we moved to personal computing. We moved from an environment where you would use the mainframe and a company would have an army of engineers from IBM come with trucks and set up a computer, elevate the floor, have special air conditioning, and have to maintain it. And you had to get time on that computer, to an environment where individualism is rewarded and it really empowers you to do things on your own, develop application. So it created a revolution. At that start, it was very unsophisticated. If you compare to what it is today, it's very simple, basic, but it was revolutionary. It started something. And that something continued to develop. After DOS came the graphics, right? Apple started with the graphic on the Macintosh, and then Microsoft with Windows. And that transferred the user interface to a user interface that relates to people. So that made more people adopt it. So now we got the technology adopted by masses of people. Millions of people around the world were using it. That was another step in this evolution/revolution. And then came the internet. And the internet amplified by much more the reach of the software and what you could do from home and from work. And that started the third phase of this revolution. And that was the internet. And in parallel to that, you had what was called Murphy law, where the hardware got more powerful every year. And with the hardware getting more powerful, you could do software things that you couldn't do before, like speech recognition and now artificial intelligence. The truth is, artificial intelligence is not like a new idea. It is just that we didn't have the computing power years ago to implement it. So you had two things going on. You have the hardware, the processing power. It had been increasing in amazing power. And so if you look today, for instance, on an Apple iPhone, it has more power than the computer on the Apollo that landed on the moon. And so you have these two things. You have the processing power that's been increased, the graphic power that's been increased. And by the way, for artificial intelligence, what is used is more the graphic processor, like NVIDIA's graphic processor, rather than Intel CPUs. And then it enables the software developer to do software development that takes advantage of that and does much more computations, and so improves the graphics. You do artificial intelligence. And another layer that happened, and that's also because of the internet, was cloud computing. And the interesting thing about cloud computing, that in a part you can look at it as going back to the mainframe era. In the mainframe area, data was not on your own machine, right? Everything was on the mainframe. Cloud computing is similar in that instead of you storing everything locally, you store it on the internet, on the cloud. But the difference is, and it's a big difference between the mainframe era and cloud computing, the cloud computing is a hybrid between your local, powerful desktop or laptop, mostly laptop these days, and the cloud. And what it enables you is like when COVID happened, the pandemic, companies overnight switched to working from home. And it works amazingly well. And the reason it was working well is really because of cloud computing and software applications that enabled it, that were based, like what we're using right now. I use Zoom with you, Zoom, right, is using cloud computing and communication software, and right away enabled one of the enablers, but a major one, of work from home, to such an extent that today, when we are about to win the battle with pandemic, we haven't yet, but we are on the way with the vaccines.
Yeah, almost, yeah.
That many technology companies are thinking to stay in a hybrid model, where they're going to still allow whoever is able to do the job from home to do the job from home at least part of the time. And that is because we have the technology from a software point of view. It's not just Zoom, it's like security software like CrowdStrike and Zscaler, DocuSign that enable you to sign documents remotely. So there's a lot of infrastructure of applications that are based on cloud computing that enabled you to move to a work from everywhere, a work from anywhere environment. Those things have major implications on our lifestyle. I mean, it's more than just getting job A done, but how you get it done. It's the way we live has changed. And the other process that has been going on is there is almost no company today. I'm not talking about technology company, I'm talking companies in general, who can be successful without being somewhat of a technology company. In other words, a company today, whatever they build, any gadget or product, non-technology project, need technology to be successful. And so we call this the digitalization of the businesses. And this process phenomena creates a big demand for software product. This accelerated by tenfold during the pandemic. And it's not going to stop now because the pandemic is kind of getting over. It will just continue. It just accelerated it. And so, like, there is no today almost a retail sale business that doesn't offer also online shopping. And that's just one example. I mean, so basically what you have is that technology has become such a part of life in every business and in every home that it's just a part of our life, and it's mostly a blessing. It's also a curse at some point, because like you go to a restaurant and sometimes you see people, instead of talking with their partner, looking at their phone, right? So there are some things that we need to watch for our society to not get addicted to some things that are not maybe the healthiest way. But overall, I think it improves quality of life and improves productivity, both good things.
Mm. Yeah, there are major implications and applications of private individuals and public companies, or shall we say in a professional language or lingo to say the stock exchange company, yeah, the professional language. So I think the Microsoft has plunged the earth into a new dawn, a new age that has lasted 20 years at least by now. So how do you think it was possible that between the Middle Ages and the Industrial Revolution we had nothing? We had nothing of the sorts like the internet. And now within a span of 20 years, we have had a great jump in technological development. How do you think that is?
I think those things happen the way technology and the industrial process happen is that you reach a point where you have the critical mass and the momentum to do major leaps. And that happened in the 80s, and from them accelerated every decade. And so we are seeing that now. We are now going through an accelerated process. It's like a chemical process where things are at a low burn, and suddenly it comes to boiling and it explodes. We are in this explosion phase, and so that will happen. And it suddenly all the pieces are coming together, and it's happening in computer technology. It also happened in medicine, and that is why, for instance, these vaccines that were developed by Pfizer and Moderna are maybe the most important medical development in terms of the impact of humanity. And they happen in record time. And so I think things are coming together, and we came to a boiling point. The things are right. And so that's what's happening. I mean, and things build on each other. Like we celebrated 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we celebrated, and I organized it, the 25 years for the first release of Windows NT. And one of the things that we pointed out is that the base code of Windows NT that shipped by now 27 years ago is still there in Windows that's shipping today. A lot on the higher level has changed, but if you go deep at the plumbing, it's still there, which is on one hand amazing, right? Because everything is changing in technology, but some basic core things are still there. And then our technology is it builds on what we did in the past and adds another layer and another layer. And at some point, it comes together. And of course, we don't know what the future will give us. There's always challenges, like, for instance, the pandemic. I mean, Bill Gates kind of predicted it, but still, most people didn't believe it, right?
Yeah, I posted it on Facebook about 2 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
So humanity, we don't know what challenges will ahead of us, but I think that really our capabilities to deal with challenges has increased significantly. And so, yeah, you are right. There is like almost an explosion now. But there are a lot of challenges that are still, we're getting closer. For instance, curing cancer, right? So many people die from that. We made huge progress, but we haven't cured it yet. So and technology is used in that a lot. In fact, the Technion are now creating a multidiscipline things. For instance, in the area of health, we're bringing together medical researcher and computer scientists, because you cannot do one without the other. And so it all comes together.
Yeah, so what do you think the future holds? Does the technological development will halt? The production of the technology will cease to exist, and there will be some kind of renewable energy utopian future? Or we will be plunging into an maybe an artificial apocalypse, if you would, because we are draining sources from this earth, and someday the sources are limited and they will cease to exist, essentially, and with them us. So what do you think we are heading towards?
I'm an optimist, and I think, as I said before, there will be challenges, and you're right in pointing out, for example, that artificial intelligence will create social challenges of If the artificial intelligence will take away a lot of jobs, how does society deal with it? And so I believe that humanity has a track record of meeting the challenges through science and innovation, not through politics and not through wars, but through science and engineering and innovation and strength of the human spirit and togetherness. Uh, and I do think there are positive signs where we live more in a global world, which means there are more communication between countries and between scientists than there were before. And so I believe that the technology advancement will not cease, it will continue. We don't know where it will take us, right? We don't know. That's the point, that we don't know the future. As Yogi Berra famously said, predictions are difficult, especially about the future.
Yes.
So we don't know where it will take us, but what I'm an optimist is wherever it will take us, we'll be in a better place. But we will have new challenges. Every change, as positive as it is, brings itself challenges and a need to adapt.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for this interesting and lovely conversation I had with you. I had so much fun. And just hearing you talk, you're still in this mindset. You're still a part of the spirit of the technological development through the personal computing and the Windows division program that was, in fact, I think the world will never look the same. Nobody nobody will attest differently, I think.
I agree. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and it was
Um,
my pleasure.
so thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.